You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dibbly Dobbly Podcast. And on today's episode of the podcast, we are reviewing match number 8 of this Super 8 stage of this ICC T20 World Cup 2024 between Australia and Afghanistan. A historic victory for Afghanistan after what happened in the Cricket World Cup last year in Mumbai, where Glenn Maxwell scored 200 and took the game away from Afghanistan's hands. Finally, Afghanistan have got their revenge a year later, and they outbatted, bowled, and outfielded Australia in this match to keep their semi-final hopes alive. And there were definitely worthy winners from this game today. They played better than Australia. The bottom line was they played better than Australia, outplayed them in all three departments. And, I don't think anyone's surprised by this result. And for Afghanistan, definitely a big win in their cricket history. On the other hand, Australia, it was a nightmare, a disaster, if you would like to call it like that. And this loss puts their semi-final hopes on a knife's edge. They were off in all three departments. They were sloppy in the field. They were poor with the bat and with the ball. And quite frankly, they weren't up to the mark, really. And therefore, they paid the price by losing this game, which is going into this game, Australia would have thought this could have been a banana peel sort of game for them. If they slipped up, then they would have been under pressure severely, which they are now. That is the case because they did lose. And then going into the last game against India, which they need to win, otherwise they are out of semi-final contention. But I suppose that's just what T20 cricket is, and T20 World Cups, they're often very hard to win. But there's lots to unpack from this game. Lots happened from both sides that we'll talk about today. And without further ado, let's get into it. Let's have a look at the match summary from match number 8 of this Super 8 stage of the ICC T20 World Cup for 2024 between Australia and Afghanistan from the AUS ground. And Afghanistan batted first and made 6 for 148 from their 20 overs. Grubaz top scored with 60 and Cummins took 3 wickets for Australia. Australia needed 149 runs to win. They were bowled out for 127 in 19.2 overs. Maxwell top scored with 59 and Nabeeb took 4 wickets for Afghanistan. Afghanistan won by 21 runs and Gulbuddin Nabeeb was named player of the match. What were the key moments and key factors from match number 8 of this Super 8 stage of this ICC T20 World Cup 2024 between Australia and Afghanistan from the AUS ground? Well, the opening partnership for Afghanistan between Ibrahim Sadran and Grubaz of 118, I should say, set the foundation for Afghanistan to reach their score of 6 for 148 from their 20 overs. The bowling spell from Gulbuddin Nabeeb changed the course of this match. He dismissed Glenn Maxwell on 59, which changed the course of the run chase for Australia. Maxwell was the only batter feeling comfortable at the crease for Australia on a tricky surface. After Nabeeb got Maxwell out, Australia collapsed and were bowled out for 127. That was the pivotal moment in this game. And those were the key moments and key factors from match number 8 of the Super 8 stage of this ICC T20 World Cup for 2024 between Australia and Afghanistan. Let's talk about how both Australia and Afghanistan performed in match number 8 of this Super 8 stage of this ICC T20 World Cup for 2024 at the AUS ground. And let's talk about Australia and talk about their performance overall and how they went about things with bat and ball. Let's start with the batting side of things. This batting performance by Australia was probably their worst batting performance for the entire tournament thus far and saved it for a must-win game to ensure qualifying for the semi-finals. They saved their worst performance in a game that mattered the most. It was a tricky surface with the ball keeping low a bit of spin, and scoring proved to be hard and difficult at times for Australia. Chasing 148 was going to be difficult, and that proved to be the case. They lost wickets at the wrong times, poor shot selection from all the batters, and lack of partnerships with the batting cost them dearly. Glenn Maxwell was the only batter that felt comfortable at the crease compared to his fellow batters. He was on track, Glenn Maxwell, to deliver another match-winning performance like he did against Afghanistan last year in the Cricket World Cup, in that game where he made 200. Developed a good partnership with Marcus Stoinis of 39 for the fourth wicket, and that looked like getting Australia back on track. But when Maxwell got out, dismissed on 59, Australia fell away pretty quickly. Not a surprise that Australia struggled on a surface that is low and slow and turning. You know, that's been Australia's Achilles heel for some time, really, and it's no surprise to anyone. But yeah, they were disappointing, really. Travis Head, David Warner, the opening partnership that's been so prolific in this tournament. They had a couple of good games, but obviously this game they got out for a duck in Travis Head's case and 3 for David Warner, just playing bad shots. And obviously Travis Head got clean bowled, and then David Warner top-edged one when playing a sweep. Mitchell Marsh was poor. Maxwell was the standout. Stoinis did his role in that partnership with Maxwell, try to support him, but then he got out. Not much from David or Wade. And then obviously when the tail enders came in, Cummins, Agar and Zampa and Hazelwood, it pretty much fell away quickly after that. And it became difficult for Australia. And also I think Mitchell Marsh, winning the toss and choosing to field first was probably a tactical error. Teams thus far here at this ground at Anos Vale in St. Vincent and the Grenadines during this T20 World Cup have not won chasing. So that's usually an indication to bat first and put a score on the board, given how difficult the surface was in hindsight. Looking at in hindsight, Australia would have batted first if they had that chance again at the toss. So I think Mitchell Marsh got that wrong. And really, Australia just didn't have a great night. Really, the batting was the start of things. The bowling was poor and the fielding was poor, as we'll talk about in a minute. But the batting group, they've got a lot of work to do going into the next game against India. It's pretty simple for Australia. They win that game, they go through, they lose, they're out. If the game gets washed out, they're out. If Afghanistan beat Bangladesh, they're out. Quite simple. And this game was always going to be a banana peel sort of game for Australia, where they slip up and derail their T20 World Cup hopes of winning this tournament, and that's what's happened. But they weren't at their best with the bat, and it was quite poor. Not surprising given how they struggle in these type of conditions. And so there's plenty of work to do for the batting group going forward for Australia into the must-win game against India. So that's the batting. Let's talk about the bowling. Australia's bowlers and their performance in this match. Just like the batting, this bowling performance by Australia was their worst bowling performance in the tournament thus far. Didn't execute their skills, didn't bowl consistent line and length, didn't build enough pressure on Afghanistan and their batters. In the end, did well to keep them below 150. Could have been a lot worse. Also, uncharacteristic fielding from Australia. Dropped catches, misfields, and Matthew Wade was poor behind the stumps too. He fumbled and didn't really do a good job behind the stumps, Wade. Also for Australia, it took them until the 15th over, so 15.5 overs to get the first wicket, which I think it was a record for Australia in T20 Nationals to get the first wicket of an innings. And we know with Afghanistan, they rely heavily on the opening partnership in Ibrahim Sabran and Gurbaz in particular. You get both of them out early, the batting drops off for Afghanistan quite quickly. And that's what happened. Once Australia finally broke through, that's what happened. The Afghanistan batting dropped off towards the end of the innings. And I think also the decision not to play Mitchell Starc, I think that was a mistake. I know Australia went in with Ashton Agar as that third spin option with Maxwell and Zampa, but really, he's your strike bowler, Mitchell Starc. If Mitchell Starc was playing in this game, he's more than guaranteed to pick you a wicket in the first over. That's what he's done in this tournament thus far. And if he was bowling to Ibrahim and Gurbaz, bowling the way he's been bowling Mitchell Starc thus far, Australia would have got those two out probably cheaply and then would have kept Afghanistan to a manageable total that they could have chased down in the end. Agar, yes, he bowled well, none for 17 from his 4, but he had a bit of a shocking day in the field. And you compare him and Mitchell Starc. Mitchell Starc's a better fielder. Mitchell Starc's a more effective bowler. Glenn Maxwell's the other spinner in this side. He can do the second spin role. I don't think Australia need to play Agar. Zampa's doing what he's doing. You don't need to play Agar as that other spinner. You got Maxwell who can do a job. He's not bad with the ball, Maxwell. None for 12 from his 2 overs. He's more than capable. They should have played their best bowlers. Don't overthink about the conditions. And I think that's what, can often get you into a bit of trouble. If you overthink the conditions and say, we need to pick 3 spinners, just pick your best bowlers. Pick your best bowlers who are going to get you the job done. And Mitchell Starc is definitely in that list. He's a strike bowler. That's his name. That's his job. That's his role. He's a strike bowler to pick up early wickets. And Australia didn't have that in this game. They decided to go with a 3-spin attack, which didn't work in the end. Yes, the conditions dictated that they went down that path, but you got to pick your best bowlers. And if Australia had Starc, in hindsight, it could have been a lot different because he's a strike bowler. He could have ripped the top order out of Afghanistan quite easily, given how good he's been bowling of late. So I think Australia made a mistake there. So, that was another tactical selection sort of error that Australia did. Also, Pat Cummins. I thought Pat Cummins was probably the best of the bowlers for Australia today. Picked up another hat-trick, Pat Cummins. Back-to-back games. He becomes the second bowler to pick up 2 hat-tricks in consecutive games, against Bangladesh and now Afghanistan. So that was a highlight for Australia in this game. I think Pat Cummins joins Wasim Akram. I think Wasim Akram's the other bowler who's done that in cricket to pick up 2 hat-tricks in back-to-back matches. And Pat Cummins joins him on that list. So that was the highlight for Australia in this game. But besides from that, they were very off, especially in the field. They dropped catches, they fumbled, they misfielded. I mentioned Ashton Agar. He had a shocking night. Matthew Wade had a shocking night behind the stumps. He fumbled everything, didn't take anything cleanly. Australia just weren't on it in the field. And that proved to be the difference as well for Australia. If they had good fielding, they caught everything, didn't drop catches, that would have made the difference. But as we know in T20 cricket, if you have a bad day in the field, you drop catches, you drop chances, you leak runs, and that's what happened with Australia, it's going to be pivotal. And it was really pivotal in this game because on a tricky surface, chasing 148, that's too many runs that you've leaked in the field because you've dropped catches, you've misfielded, balls went to the boundary after being fumbled. So Australia weren't on it really. So it was underwhelming, it was mediocre, and it was poor. And, I think the bowling group would take responsibility for that. And same with the whole team in terms when it comes to the batting performance as well, will take the responsibility of that and said we weren't good enough. And they weren't. So hopefully for Australia, now they've put themselves under pressure, having to win against India. Well, what happens when the game gets washed out with rain? You've only got yourselves to blame. Because if that happens, then Australia get knocked out anyway. It doesn't really matter what Afghanistan do after that. So really, it was a poor showing from Australia. Hopefully it's the wake-up call they needed. Thus far in this tournament, they haven't lost a game. And they've lost a game where it really matters the most. So maybe we'll put them back into line and probably make them realize, yep, we weren't good enough. We need to do these things. But that's T20 cricket. T20 cricket, whoever does well on the day, whoever executes better with bat and ball and in the field will more likely win the game than the opposition, who don't do that so well. And in this case, it was Afghanistan who did that well and not so much with Australia. So overall, the team performance by Australia was pretty poor. They need to do something quickly. Otherwise, they could be facing a plane ride home, which is probably the likely scenario, but we'll have to wait and see what happens in the must-win game against India. So Australia, just to finish off, very poor, very disappointing. Let's talk about Afghanistan and talk about their performance in this match with bat and ball. We'll start with the batting side of things. And it was a good performance by Afghanistan with the bat. Reaching the score of 148 was a competitive total. And a match-winning score on a pitch that proved to be difficult in the end. And they got to a score that they could defend. And the opening partnership, yet again, between Sadran and Gurbaz was key for Afghanistan. Made 118 for the first wicket, They rely so much on the opening partnership, Afghanistan, and to get them off to a good start. In this game, they did. They lasted until the 15th over, where they finally got out. Australia finally broke the opening partnership at that stage of the game. But they already set the foundation and platform for the other batters to come in and just do their thing. But as we know with Afghanistan, once the openers go out, it pretty falls away pretty quickly with their batting. And I think they would have been disappointed not to get over 150 plus. They looked like getting that at one stage. But once the openers went, the rest of the batting sort of fell after that. But, at least with Afghanistan, Gurbaz and Sadran in this opening partnership, they played some good cricket shots. They were responsible. They ran well between the wickets. They rotated the strike nicely. They did the basics well. And I think that's what we see from Afghanistan with their batting. We saw that in the World Cup last year in India, where they chased down totals in one-day cricket. Different format, but still, they play with that sense of doing the basics well with the bat, not playing rash shots, and just playing the ball on its merits, and know when to score and, how to access your areas. And that's what they did in this game against Australia. And also they weren't intimidated. Gurbaz and Sadran, they weren't really intimidated by the Australian bowlers, the presence and the aura that some teams may feel when facing the likes of Cummins, Hazelwood and Zampa in this game for Afghanistan, and other teams as well. When they face against the Australian bowlers, they may feel a sense of, dread and, being intimidated by them. But Afghanistan weren't really. The openers took it on. They put them under pressure, and that's a good thing, I suppose. So Afghanistan's batting, they did more than enough to get to a score that was more than enough to win, and that's what they did. So I think going into the game for them against Bangladesh should be important to make sure they continue doing the right things with the bat, and hopefully that can be the difference of them reaching a semi-final. Potentially, we'll have to wait and see. So that's the batting. Let's talk about the bowling very quickly, Afghanistan's bowlers and their performance. It was a dominant bowling display by Afghanistan. Defending 148 on this tricky pitch was a defendable score, built pressure on Australia and took wickets at crucial times during the run chase. Their fielding was outstanding. Compared to Australia, their fielding was very good. They caught everything. They took some very good catches. They fielded superbly. Their ground fielding was good. And that was the difference. That proved to be the difference in the end. And there was one bowler who pretty much turned the game on its head, and that was Gulbuddin Nabeeb, player of the match. His spell, 4 for 20 from his 4 overs, changed the course of this game on a very difficult, tricky pitch here in St. Vincent. Took 4 for 20 from 4 overs, which included 13 dot balls. He took the key wicket of Glenn Maxwell in particular, which pretty much changed the course of the run chase for Australia. Maxwell was looking to get Australia over the line. He was looking comfortable compared to the other Australian batters. And then Gulbuddin comes in and gets him out. That was a turning point. He also got out Marcus Stoinis. And the partnership that Maxwell and Stoinis had at 39 for the 4th wicket, it was looking like Australia with that partnership were going to come back and chase down the runs. But Gulbuddin came in, got rid of Stoinis first of all, and then soon after he got rid of Maxwell, and that proved to be the difference in the game. Medium pace, he's not really that quick, but medium pace, hitting a spot and a length on a pitch that kept low a bit. And he got some seam movement as well. He got the ball to move at times as well off the seam. And it was tricky for the Australian batters, and he was more than effective, really. A lot of people said going into this game here in St. Vincent that the spin will be the key. And really, Afghanistan spinners did well to tie down the Australian batters. Rashid Khan got a wicket. So did Mohammad Nabi. And Noor Ahmed didn't get a wicket, but he was effective. But it was mainly more the seamers, Gulbuddin and also Al-Haq, who picked up 3 wickets. Pretty much picked up 7 wickets between them. They did the damage. They did the job. And Afghanistan overall bowled really, really well. And their bowling is their strength, Afghanistan. Obviously, the batting, we've discussed before. The openers are very strong, but the rest of the batting falls away very quickly. But their bowling attack's very dangerous and can be effective. As we saw in this game, whatever score they put on the board, they'll back themselves to defend that. If there's a bit of something in the wicket, with their spinners and seamers, as we saw in this game, they can definitely back themselves to chase anything down. And that's what happened. And it was a really good performance. And overall, it was a good performance. I think everyone's saying this is an upset. Of course it is, in the context of that they've defeated Australia, a big team in the world. Afghanistan, have pulled off this victory. But I don't think it's an upset. I think many people who've seen Afghanistan develop over the years as a cricket side, especially in the last few years, especially the last World Cup last year, they're getting better. They're improving. Yes, there are a few areas that they can get better at. They don't quite have that batting depth at the moment, but the bowling's pretty good. They've got some good depth there, but they haven't got some depth with the batting. But I don't think anyone was surprised by the result, and, they're a good opportunity, Afghanistan. They've got a great opportunity, I should say, of making it to the semi-finals. And that's the beauty of T20 cricket. It brings the gap between the top-ranked nations and the lower-ranked nations together. Afghanistan have developed into a very good limited overs side. They don't play a lot of Test cricket, but one day in T20 cricket, the gap between them and the rest is starting to narrow, and that's good for the game. I suppose that can only benefit the game in some way. But to finish off about Afghanistan's performance, very clinical, very dominant, and I think they should be pleased with their efforts. And it was a very well-deserved victory over Australia. Some concluding thoughts to end on. It was a spirited victory by Afghanistan, and it's a victory well-deserved. They outbatted, bowled Australia and dominated them in this game. The nightmare of Mumbai in the Cricket World Cup last year with Maxwell are banished. This victory has kept Afghanistan's hopes of reaching a T20 World Cup semi-final alive. In 2010, Afghanistan played in their first ever T20 World Cup in the Caribbean, in the West Indies, and 14 years later, back in the West Indies for this T20 World Cup in 2024, it has been a long journey. Everyone is calling this an upset, but I don't think anyone was surprised given how Afghanistan has improved in the last few years. The next game for Afghanistan is against Bangladesh on Monday, the 24th of June at the Anos Vale ground. This game follows the Australia and India match, and for Afghanistan, if Australia lose or if the game against Australia and India gets washed out, and if Afghanistan win over Bangladesh, a semi-final spot beckons. For Australia, it was a night to forget. They weren't at the races, so to speak, and were really poor. The batting, bowling, and fielding were off, and now their semi-final hopes are on knife's edge. Australia must win their next game against India to book a place in the semi-finals. The game is on Monday, the 24th of June at the Darren Sammy National Cricket Stadium. Australia will be hoping that the scars that they created against India in the Cricket World Cup final last year will come in handy for them in this must-win game. It's simple. Win, you progress, and lose, it's all over. Plus, a threat of a washout looms. And if that happens, Australia will more than likely be knocked out. Thanks, everyone, for listening to our review of match number 8 of this Super 8 stage of the ICC T20 World Cup 2024 between Australia and Afghanistan. If you're watching or listening to this episode of the podcast on our YouTube channel, let us know your thoughts on match number 8 of this Super 8 stage of the ICC T20 World Cup 2024 between Australia and Afghanistan in the comments. We would love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for watching and listening. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.